Oh, you guys got it. Good work. Thank you, Jean. All right, thanks, guys. Let's reconvene our general session. And the only item we have left is to discuss the 21 budget. Todd, I am full of questions. I'm not sure how you want to, do you want to go through this with us, or what are you?
Probably easy to do your questions. I don't know. The first document I send with the numbers, the first 5 pages of that would be your general fund budget resolution. And then the next 19 pages or whatever it is are the non-general fund resolution. I did not include any comments from the non-general fund, and I did not use last year's as the basis necessarily on the non-general funds. I wasn't sure if that was our intent with those. Those are what the departments have currently entered that they believe they will be spending in 2021 for the non-general. So for the general, then that's where I have the narrative, which, you know, there were a lot of comments and whatnot, but not, when it came down to it, there weren't a lot of specific asks. I have a feeling it's one of those things, everybody was okay with trying to stay to the minimum, but if the door's open, it's going to be a stampede going through. You know, they hinted that there were things, but that they understood is, I guess, what I'm saying. So I would be cautious in awarding to those that did ask, with the understanding that there were people who maybe didn't ask, but they have stuff pending should they realize there is money available.
You know, Todd, one thing I feel fairly strongly about, and I don't know how other elected officials or department heads would feel about that, is this additional position that Joanne wants for the building maintenance at the sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially with this pandemic going on. I mean, she has been asking for this. This is the 3rd year. Well,
we haven't said no for financial reasons.
I know.
So that one, I guess, is, I mean, we've been ready to fund it if the logistics can get worked out. I don't know if the new sheriff will be more receptive. Joanne's idea is that the sheriff both hire and oversee that person. What Dave Doak wanted was for Joanne to still oversee.
Oh, that was the hang up there? I didn't know what
that was the start of it, and it just never got fleshed out as to, you know, again, Joanne doesn't want to have them calling her all the time, day and night, blah, blah, blah. She understands, like, you know, they're not going to be able to hire someone that's going to fix the furnace and fix the air conditioner. Her maintenance will still do that because they have the specialists, but things getting clogged in toilets and fixing simple leaks on the sinks and stuff, that's what she wants that person to do. And then they could control the hours of that person if they want to make him an evening person and he does it in the evening or whatever the case. But that was her dream. Like I said, it wasn't a financial reason though, so I don't know where we're at with that.
Well, so you think we should wait for the next sheriff to ask, you know?
It might be the easiest route.
Open. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's 2 potential problems. One is it's hard for Joanne to ask for a position for another office. Like, that's not quite how.
Well, that's part of the issue, because if the sheriff is going to be given money, I think he'd rather hire a correction officer.
Well, I think that's exactly what happened, because I think he came in with those like 20 some positions he wanted. And I think he had maintenance on there, but we didn't fund all the positions. So he, you know, and I don't know how you avoid that situation other than, you know, if that's the intent, that then the maintenance department stops.
That's true.
That's
true. That's a problem.
Yeah. But that's where, I mean, that one was never a financial consideration. We've always had the money ready if the logistics could be figured out. So again, I don't know. we can still set the money aside and wait to see if it can get worked out with the new sheriff, or you guys can talk with Joanne and see if she wants to just go ahead and hire it out of hers and do whatever. But that's kind of where that one was.
Yeah. So really, that's out of our control. I mean, all we can do is put the money aside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could down the road get into,
I mean, the other option to test out, and people hate to go down this road, I've suggested it for IT too, for the Justice Center, is you can hire a service and, they'll come out 24/7. You pay a little bit more for when you use them, but you also don't pay for them constantly when you're not.
And
I don't know if that would be an option.
And no benefits, right?
Right. I mean, you play, if they come out, if it's a 2-hour job, it's a 2-hour job and they come out, and that could be a solution for, the late nights, the weekends, those type of service calls that they need. Again, I have suggested that before and it's never gone anywhere either. I never know why the ideas die, but I know that one's been brought up. To me, it still seems like a viable idea.
Well, I would think with no benefits and them not being there all the time, it wouldn't be that much more. I mean, if any more.
And I assume, like when they call in the evening, it still takes us, half an hour to get out there to do it. I mean, most services, they come within the hour that you call, or, you can stipulate those type of things.
And it's overtime, right? When we go out.
Yeah, for our people, yeah. Or they got to flex it off of their next day,
Oh, well.
So, but we can revisit that problem and find solutions. I think it'd be a good idea to sit down with the new sheriff and see what his thoughts are.
Okay.
I'm not sure why the trustees never did that type of work. They do painting and stuff, but and maybe they're not allowed in the cells. I'm not sure there.
Okay.
So starting with 001, Todd, can you define for me the numbers on the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the 3s is salaries. That includes the whole grouping, benefits, all that. 4s is what we call contractual services. So that's if we have to hire it out. 5 is material and supplies. 6 is capital. 7 is what we call miscellaneous. A lot of the financial items get into the 7s. 8 is always debt, so you wouldn't see that at all in the general fund, but you'll see it in some of the later water resource funds and stuff. 8s are the debts, and then 9s are the financial tools. So transfer outs, that sort of thing shows up in the 9s.
And then the top line is the total for that department.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the way the budget's written, you budget to the 3s as a whole. And then they break out, the departments break out that money to the lines as needed.
Okay, so under commissioner, what are some of the contractual services? Just remind me.
Gene is a contractual service right now. Dave Wilkins is a contractual service. I can get in and tell you more.
Why is Gene a contractual service?
For the admin share of his salary. His director's salary is in water resource. His administrator salary, the way they set it up is as a contractual service. Water resources actually bills the commissioners for the time that he spends on that service.
Okay. And then attorney's fees like Jim.
Yeah. A lot of your boards and commissions come up under that.
Is that
not boards like NOPEC and those type of things.
Annual fees and dues.
Dues is in another place. And most of those are in commissioners other, but this is like, for the commissioners, I think it's crazy as to why this is there and that's not, but, I'm getting in here. I said, wait for it to log in. I can tell you
Okay.
some of the bigger items.
It's pretty
Verizon is in there.
Verizon for
Yeah,
what?
cell phones. That's cell phones.
For two commissioners or for?
Well, it'd be everybody in that group. I don't know if Amy and Julie have those, but like the iPads and stuff that had services, those would be under Verizon also. Oh, your phones are contractual services. That's your big one, is the phone and the photocopier.
So the desk phones?
Yeah. Those are contracted out with AT&T, and then your copiers, because we lease them, are a contractual service.
Okay. And internet then too?
All the internet goes through IT.
Okay. And then one of the things that I had asked, and you have the column, but is an explanation on the changes. So
yeah, right now, the only thing I've included are the elected official changes to most of the offices, because that's mandated by the state. And then in the commissioners other, that additional money, that is for solid waste, JFS, and VAWA. Those are programs that now need general fund money because they're coming up short. And that's additional money on top of what they already needed in 2020.
Now, are these cash advances or are they, what are they? Loans?
These will be transfers.
Okay.
So
this year,
before we go down there, I'm sorry. So this
first
change is
the commissioner's salaries.
Salary increase in the legislation.
Yes.
Okay.
And then all the benefits that go with that, plus, and you guys account for about 18,000 of that. The other 12,000 was just that you were a little low anyways, because I think maybe Vicky got the increase last year. Yeah. So the appropriation was a little low for this year because she got it ahead. You get it when your
2 years, yeah,
service starts, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay. All right, so 010. Where does this show up in the? It's just in the total, not in any of the lines.
It's in the threes. The 30,000.
I'm sorry. No, I'm down to commissioner other.
Oh, so in the nines, you have that 439,000 extra. This year we gave solid waste 250,000 as a transfer. Next year they're probably going to need closer to 400,000. So there's 150,000 extra in there for them. Vic is probably still going to come up short on his VAWA grant, which was 109,000. And then JFS has asked for, I think I put 180. I think she actually asked for some weird number like 176,000. She worded it as a placeholder in case they need it. So she's not sure that they will, but if they do, she's pretty certain that that's the maximum they'll need.
And the 2.4 million, can you break that down? The 250 for solid waste, I mean in the 2020.
Yeah, so that includes your cash advances, which is a lot of that. And that goes, most of your cash advances go out and then come back in within the same year. But while they're out, they need to hold budget funds. Our contingency is in there, which then we dole out. The like the sick leave conversion, we had 165,000 in sick leave conversion. That starts the year there. I'm trying to think if your dues don't come out of, yeah, your dues do. No, they don't. They come out of commissioners other, but not the sevens. Most of that is cash advance and then placeholders for different programs. Retirements, we now keep 250,000 set aside for retirements. And then as they occur, they go to the departments. Basically those things we know we're gonna have, we just don't know where they're at. Vehicle accidents, all that kind of stuff.
What's the other cash advances? I mean, do you have it? Is it handy for you and whatever you're looking at to build out that number?
That no? It's about $1.5 million we set aside for cash advances. That's the bulk of that figure.
And in 2020, we did $1.5 million in cash advances.
We actually did more than that. We had to move another 800,000 in there between, because JFS got did they get a 500 or 250 cash advance? They got 250 transfer, I think a 250 cash advance. Solid Waste got the $500,000 cash advance. And somebody else got an $80,000 cash advance that wasn't anticipated. That's not ringing a bell. But anyway, yeah, we advanced more than that in 2000. Any grants, any road projects like OPWC, those type of things where we are going to get reimbursed later. You know, a lot of the state funding is reimbursement. So that's what that money is there for. It's to forward the fund so that the work can get done. And then it waits until the reimbursement comes to come back.
So is this 2.4 in the 2020 column? It doesn't feel like a real number with like expended. Like
you don't spend it out of there. It's
okay.
That's holding the money. But
Okay.
then when it gets spent out of somewhere else, we actually put it there and spend it there. But that's kind of a placeholder at the beginning of the year so that we know we're anticipating 2.5 million being spent. We just don't know where it's going to get spent at yet.
So I get doing that for 2021 like that. But what is confusing is that should be an actual number for 2020.
Well, that's the budget. That's what was in the budget.
Oh, I see. That's what you budgeted last year, and that's not how this isn't actual.
Right. Yeah. These are all budget numbers, not expenditures. Yeah.
Okay. So you're increasing that off of last year because you're anticipating an additional 180, for example, on JFS, but you're building that on a number where JFS got 500 last year. But you didn't budget for that?
I didn't use that 800 in those figures. So, but it does include, so like solid waste got 250. So I left that 250 in and they need another 150 more. So that 150 is in that 439. JFS only needs 179 of a transfer. They're probably going to need this 250 that we transferred before as an advance though. So they're going to need an additional 180, but they'll still probably need the advance to get through the beginning of the year.
And then Vic, what did you say you thought he was going to need?
That's the VAWA. Is it VAWA, VOCA or VAWA? It's VAWA. You know, he lost almost 2/3 of his funds.
Right. Yeah, he wrote us a letter on that, right?
Right. And so I'm assuming that that's also going to be down. They go October to October.
Right.
right, so let me try this again on the 2.4.
Uh-huh.
So how much over 2.4 did you need this year?
This year we went,
Like, what does the actual look like for
let me
this year?
let me get in there. So this year we had to add, it's 2.506. So 2.5 is what we brought it to this year between other things that had come back and those going out.
2.6?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe another way to look at this is this money is in a holding fund, as Todd, I think, correctly identifies it, and the board has to authorize it to be moved. So it's like pre-budgeted if needed, but it's under the control of the Board of Commissioners. Is that a fair statement, Todd?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And is this typically how a public entity does this type of fund? Like, it's sort of like it's a contingency fund. Is that the way you think of it, Todd? Is that the way?
All entities have somewhere, yes, where there is this slush kept. Not all of them have like a commissioner's other where they pile it in the miscellaneous.
But
so
it's
that,
somewhere.
But yeah, everybody keeps money somewhere. What a lot of counties do is like in your commissioner's department would be $4 million. And then you would give that to other departments as the need arose.
And so this wouldn't show up anywhere in JFS's budget,
No.
Which is not really in this.
Not till they request it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can move on from that line. Sorry.
Okay.
Can you help me understand what the 6th line is under internal services?
So that's all, and actually that probably could come out or not. Joanne gets a series of projects. This year she bought some of the computers for the original computer replacement. The elevator at Riddle, I think, came out of that for this year. Those are capital projects that Joanne has to manage, usually on behalf of one of your buildings. And so we usually, I don't know where the other 3,000 came from that, but usually we set 150 there just for those type of things that come up that she has to do.
Is that where like the roof on the admin building, the repairs that were done this year, would that have come out of there?
Yeah, that probably would have come out of there. Any capital project that wasn't planned for per se, Now, like if we know we're going to do the roof in 2021, we'd set it somewhere else.
Okay. So Joanne has $150,000 capital fund.
Kind of a contingency fund for, yeah. Because she also has 300,000 in her maintenance line, and that's the lawn mowing and sink repairs and all that type of stuff. But then we usually set aside an extra 150 for large things. Like I said, Riddle took up 80,000 one year. They were looking, at Vic's buildings leak. That came in, started coming in over 100,000 though, so we stopped on that one. But kind of a contingency for buildings, yeah.
Okay. So on the building maintenance, This is where the maintenance staff salaries.
3s is their salaries, and then 4s is all the materials and supplies they need to do it with.
And the 4s under internal services are Joanne, Shannon.
Correct, yeah.
Um,
No,
Not
that portion, internal
Salary.
services is Fund 7000.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's no 3 there. I
in
got
future
it.
pages, yeah, that's contractual services that she hires out. Right now, I want to say a lot of that's COVID, but that can't be right because we aren't charging it to her. Let me double check what's in her 4s right now. Kind of similar to the other, it's just this is stuff that we have to hire.
Why isn't hers all together?
Funding. Her
Okay.
her salary and main work is charged back to departments. She gets 15% on every photocopy that goes through microfilm, blah blah blah, and that builds up in her fund for her to spend. These are things that aren't part of her normal operations, so they shouldn't go through her enterprise fund, but that still need done and that kind of fall under her just because she oversees these type of expenses.
Okay. So
DS Architecture, I'm not sure which project they were doing, but they're in there. GB Hawk Construction. Oh, that was in the clerk's office.
yeah.
So that's some of the stuff that came out of there.
So I'm sorry, Todd. So
That's okay.
those are kind of one-off sounding. So is this the Riddle elevator or is that somewhere else actually? Is
The
that
elevator was in the 6s. In the
Of-
4s.
of the 12 of the 01, 2?
Yeah, the 4s would be like if she has to hire an electrician
Okay.
to do, because we no longer have, well, I don't know if we no longer have, our guy's not comfortable doing the big work.
So
they'll
that
do
was the
little
clerk's.
things. So 90,000 of that was in the clerk's area, helping prep that stuff. I'm just looking here. Like I said, there's DS Architecture for almost 39,000. I can't honestly remember what they did.
It just seems a little odd to me to carry this forward.
And so that number could probably come down again. Usually we have 150. We could take that down
On
The
the
key
on the
is-
4 or on the 6?
on the
Both?
4.
Okay.
Um,
So 100 off there.
yeah, you could.
I mean, I get that you may use it. It just
Yeah.
that was like a pretty thoughtfully planned out. I mean, the clerk thing
Yeah.
wasn't
Right.
like
So usually what happens though is then we come and we increase that line, which we can do again. So yeah, we can bring that down to 152.
Wasn't DS Architecture working in the Board of Elections?
That's probably, I bet that was for their security assessment or whatever you want to call it. That might have been yeah. And Board of Elections is still asking for stuff to be done in theirs, but anyway, that's what that 0012 in the general fund, that's basically for your buildings. Again, kind of contingency, big items that come up.
okay. All right, so building maintenance 016, no change. The 658 is the salaries for the maintenance workers. Is this building maintenance like every building maintenance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the only exception there is like the court. No, they no longer hire out. Vic hires out some of his like carpet cleaning and stuff. So that falls in his department. But in terms of actual county employees and the work done by them, yes, it is all in here.
Okay. And then for the contractual services, why is that such a big line?
Again, all the like service contracts on air conditioners and all that stuff goes in there.
Okay. And are these numbers here, were they all close to the actuals?
Actual for that is we've currently spent 1.4 million with another 260,000 encumbered. So right now we've committed all but 200,000 of that. So yeah, we come close.
Okay. And same thing on the material supplies.
That they probably come even closer. Let me get that for you. Now, material and supplies, they have 30,000 left that they haven't spent of that 178. So they spent 140, almost 150.
Okay. I mean,
what is 6 in building and maintenance? Is capital like what is that?
I bet that's just a just in case number. Let me see if they've actually used it. Oh, this year they did spend it. That was to envirochemical. And that may be an annual purchase. I'm not sure why that's in the 6s. It doesn't give me any more detail than that.
that name sounds real familiar to me.
And there's an
Okay.
account number there. So that I said, I'm not sure why that would end up in the 6s, but that does look like an annual purchase for $5,975. That may be a lease on a piece of equipment. I bet is what that is then.
So Todd, the two on the 1.7, the like 200,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 20 to 30,000 on the 5 item, line 5.
Mm-hmm.
What happens? Does that get absorbed into the carryover, or how does that non-budget, like budgeted but non-spent?
Yeah,
revenues?
I mean, nothing rolls over into the new year. So whatever a department doesn't spend is just money that we have. That's part of why when I do my forecasts, like in September, to get to actual expenditures, I use that to judge how much we're going to have unspent from one year that we can then spend into the next year. So basically it gets absorbed into the budgeting process for next year. It's usually not a surprise that we end up with that extra money, you know.
Does it go to another line though, or does it stay in that line?
No, well, so like here, you're going to rebudget it. So it's possible they just won't spend it again. Chances are every 3 years or so, they do reach that level. And that's why we budget that amount. But it's hard to explain, but if I budget 100 and you always spend 90, I budget 100 and you always spend 90. In my forecast, I really only count that as $90, even though we're always budgeting 100. So when I do like my 5-year forecasts, I know you're only ever going to spend 90. And so I know we have an extra $80 in 5 years to work with. So it's not that it's extra, it is accounted for in all the other conditions. But that's where you hear departments say, I gave back. Well, you didn't give back, you just didn't spend what you were allowed to. I don't know if that answers your question.
So so how much did you, of that difference between budget and actual, when you forecasted in September, are you thinking we have to roll over into 2021?
Out of our whole budget, it was over 2.5 million. I don't know off of each specific line.
Okay.
And that's where, like, if we have, let's say we have $43 million in revenue and you guys budget 45, that's why I don't always panic, because I know there's that 2 million extra. You know what I mean? Like, it's accounted for.
Right.
When you start getting closer to budgeting 46 million on 43 million in revenue, that's when I start getting nervous, because now we're starting to get on the edges of the error. What if something does happen and people spend that money? So, like, when I say it's accounted for, it's always taken into consideration that departments almost never spend their entire budgets. We count on that fact. But as we decide how much to spend, and when you guys ask me if there's extra money, that's all taken into account then when we say yes or no to try and do another project in the middle of the year.
Okay. All right, I can keep moving. Is that okay, Vicki?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on the microfilm, did we reduce a position?
There is a reduction there, and so salaries will come down. However, I don't know if you noticed my narrative.
I did. That's what I'm kind of looking at.
We kind of need to begin deciding what that department really does. It's turning more into a records center than a microfilming center. We're going to have to start microfilming out more. I think Joanne has come to the board and explained that it's just not worth it to purchase our own equipment anymore. Number one, the type of equipment we used to purchase, they just don't make anymore. And the type of equipment that is available is meant for massive entities, and it's very expensive. The key is you hire those people who bought that massive equipment, and then they do it for you. So I left the salary there for now, because a lot of that salary, we're probably going to just move down into contractual services and start getting some of that information microfilm. The other thing I told you guys, and it's still sitting there, you guys have a room full of about 150 boxes that could almost all be thrown away. The key is we need help getting that done. My recommendation is to hire some movers or whatever, get those boxes to places, have people look at them, and then get it, hire people to shred it and just be done. I think if you did that in earnest, you would actually have a better idea of how much room you really do need to store what really does need kept. Between microfilming and destroying those records, getting rid of the garbage, not garbage, but stuff that no longer needs to be kept because it's past its time frame. A lot of that record center would be reduced. And then it's possible that maybe we don't need that big a space. Maybe we could cordon off some of that building and use it for other purposes. I don't know. The key is we've got to spend a little bit of money to figure that out, so that it does convert from a microfilm center into a record storage, and then he's better able to find his stuff, better able to sort his stuff, all that kind of thing.
Though, Todd, I've heard that we can't get the people in charge of those to actually look at them and tell us whether they're.
Well, that's partly true. So that's why, you may need to drop it on their doorstep and say,
look at this.
What gets done? I mean, in my mind, all the commissioners' room, you guys should hire 3 guys in a truck and have them bring it back and stick it in Joanne's office. And then, Julie, Amy, Judy, even my staff could help, just pick through it over the course of a year. To see, like I said, most of it is agendas and stuff that have passed their date. They were put back in there when Deb was here, so that's over 4 years ago. And most of those items only need kept for 3 to 5 years. Now, like the auditor's office does a pretty good job. They label the boxes, invoices need kept for 3 years. They keep 1 year on their floor and then 2 years go to the record center. But when they give Glenn next year's boxes, they say, throw out those ones. And so like the auditor's office is kept pretty fresh. So their room probably is exactly what needs to be there. Solid waste has quite a bit of stuff that needs gone through. It's chaotic. And of course the courts, you have to keep them forever, but that's where we start microfilming some of that stuff. If we haven't been in a box from 1980 in 10 years, we might as well microfilm it rather than having that box still take up all that room.
Right.
So
Right.
I guess the end of my story is I think you'll still spend all that money.
Yeah.
If we're gonna make headway on that. And even Joanne made the comment, again, he's really not the print shop microfilm like he used to be. We
Right.
need to kind of transition that facility and that office into more of a modern era in terms of what he should be doing and give him the tools to do it with.
Though, Todd, would that be a commissioner decision or would that be the elected official decision? Say they do have records there that they do have to keep, but they're 1980. And we say we'd like them microfilmed. Could they say, no, we don't want them microfilmed, we want them right there?
That's a good question. For microfilming, I don't know the answer. We could probably ask the prosecutor if needed. Most of the departments work fairly well. The other option we have is like those records from 1980. If they don't want to microfilm them, we send them off to Iron Mountain or something. Again, everybody thinks it's free, but that record center, we're heating it, we're electricating it, we're replacing equipment. We've got to soon replace the roof on it. So it's not free for us to just keep stuff there either, so we've got to begin deciding what the best way to keep our records and keep them nice is. For those that need kept permanently and we need to keep the paper, maybe we look at Iron Mountain and pay the annual fee for them to do it. And then we can reduce our footprint and not have to heat nearly as large a building for us to do it.
Now, do they microfilm and shred?
They do everything at Iron Mountain. For just the microfilming, they're probably a little bit more expensive, although, people pay for it because it's an all in one place. They actually have people that will come to us to microfilm. And Joanne actually last year, we sent out almost $15,000 worth of items to be microfilmed. We got a pretty good deal by going to a local service and we took it to them. You get a little bit cheaper if you use those kind of entities. But I think we need to make a concerted effort to make some headway on that because it's just kind of been lingering for a few years. I don't think we've had our microfilm equipment for, it's probably been 3.5 years that we've been without.
All right, I don't have any questions on HR. Building inspection. What is this? Is this?
That's Randy.
So this doesn't address any of the Randy changes?
So there is.
Or is there another
2000
place?
So no, that would be here. That's on his request. He asked Janet to refactor. One position did come in at a higher pay band, and to move that person to the minimum of that band would take $2,300. He then wanted, I believe, to promote workers into new levels that he had created. And if he were awarded that, it would take almost $9,000 more. So I wasn't sure. I know he's been talking with the board. I'm not sure how much you're familiar with them. When I spoke to Janet, she indicated, well, no, only the one employee actually factored to a change. The other employees, even though their points factored a little higher, they were still within the pay band that they're already in. So the 2,300, if you're going to award minimal adjustments, is based on the factoring. The rest of it is based on the fact that he would like to promote people.
Promote them by meaning give them a raise or give them duties, extra duties.
Well, what he did was he created instead of a clerk, he created like a clerk 2 and called the current person a clerk 1. And he wants to basically promote that person into the clerk 2 spot. And by promoting them into the clerk 2 spot, now they are past their minimum. And so they need adjusted up to the minimum. They're still doing essentially the same work. You know, my stand on that has always been the commissioners need to figure out how existing employees are supposed to move through the system. We've been focused on getting the minimums up, which we've now going to accomplish this year. But, you know, 80% of our workers are less than halfway through their pay scale. And so you have a lot of, what?
Hold on that.
Uh-huh.
Your view aside, is Randy, which is, I'm not saying that's not relevant, but just for now, arguing Randy's position. I thought Randy was changing duties and then changing salaries based on changed duties. You're saying no, or
that
you're
wasn't
saying
how
partially?
Janet thought it was. I'm talking to Janet. Randy's hard to follow.
Okay.
Their base argument was these people were factored wrong to begin with, which take that for what it's worth. But basically, yeah, the other people are within their pay band. So the only way they would not be within their pay band is if he put them into these other positions. Now, maybe he wants to add duties when he puts them into those other positions, but the fact is that's how he's getting them the pay raises to move their job title.
Vicki, do you want to look into this over the next week?
Yeah, because I'm kind of confused. I thought they were going to have additional duties.
That's what I thought too. I hear what you're saying, Todd, and I just feel
Right.
like we need to put a pin in this and either make the decision for next week or put it off, you know, into the future. But I don't know that we can. I think we hear what you're saying and we should talk to Randy and then.
Well, it affects all your directors. I mean,
Yeah.
Janet would like to give Jenna more duties and promote her, and the board said no.
Right.
You know, I have Joan that I've talked to you about. I know we're live here, so I won't say too much, but you know, we've taken on considerably altered duties in having to handle Kent and now Manaway coming up. You know, again, it seems like there should be a more standard process than whoever badgers you the most, I guess. We all need to know how our employees are supposed to advance their careers, if that is what we're supposed to be trying to do. And if we're not, then we all should be following that. And that doesn't mean there aren't exceptions, but.
Well,
again,
to be honest, like I attended the meeting with Janet and we talked about the Jenna issue, and she said that she was not pursuing that right now based on, you know, where we are.
Yeah.
Randy has followed up after in the spring saying,
if you guys want to do it, you can do it. I'm just pointing out to you, there are those of us waiting who are saying, well, wait a minute. I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah, I'm saying on one of yours when you're saying, hey, you got problems with your directors.
Well,
like, well, one,
if you talk
I
to
don't
Janet
think you're
though,
correct.
and I won't speak too much for Janet, but Janet was very enthusiastic and Jenna was disheartened when that fell through. Part of the reason she's not pushing it is because she thinks the board already has said no. And she's, you know, some of us, when the board says no, we take no and we move on. But it doesn't mean it isn't a bitter pill that lingers.
I know, but I don't want to muddle things here. Like right now we're talking about the budget for next year, what changes departments have requested. Randy has definitely requested this. So this is the time I feel like to do that. If part of your pushback is, well, we need to know the direction of when do you do these things? Well, this is part of when you do it in the budget. If you want to change positions around and increase a line item, this is the
Speaking
time.
for myself, I did not push more for Joan because I'm also under the impression that the board, even though never told me no, because you never answered me, the answer is no. So speaking for myself, if I see other employees getting promoted at the same time, some departments have cut positions, other departments are staying the same, it is frustrating.
Noted.
So speaking only for me, I'll say that. So, Randy may have been the one that put the position forward, but a lot of us didn't make requests because we were sent a letter saying that we were expected to cut even, not ask for more.
Right.
So you should keep that in mind as you evaluate the ones who did ask. That's all I'm trying to point out.
Well, and part of it has to do too with what comes through Randy's office and his budgetary picture, which is what we're looking at. I mean, some of that isn't as clear to me. I mean, the fees that he generates, et cetera.
That's true, but I think we need to look at additional responsibilities that departments have taken on. I mean, if you're going to look at that, you also have to look at this. It's a difficult call. There's no doubt about it.
Right. Okay. I think we should just note that, which you did too on your notes here, Todd. And that's not a decision that I think we're prepared to make today.
Well, one thing, I remember the Randy issue as being they were changing duties and hence the increases. But I think the duties were more aligned with what was assigned prior to changing job descriptions under the previous director. But that's neither here nor there. The piece I don't want to walk.
Yeah, those factorings of what they're actually doing came back with only the one.
Right. The one piece I didn't want to lose, and Todd and I've worked on this with Randy, mostly myself, but in water resources, but they also have the 52,000 ask for software. And correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, we've pulled that because there was no movement on it from the CARES funding.
There was the potential to get 1 year out of CARES. Randy has still asked for that to be included as general fund now going into next year.
Right.
It would be an annual expense of 52,000, a one-time expense of 90,000. So
Exactly.
next year would actually be 90,000, and then each year after that would be 52,000.
That's software.
Yeah, it allows people to submit electronically.
It's more than just a software package. It's a cloud-based. You go out in the field, you can see the permit, you can see the plans. It's all integrated. And it would be nice if the building department, water resource, and the health department were all on the same platform. And then we talked about bringing in all the zoning inspectors countywide, and it keeps building. The problem is, I'm going to steal a phrase from Commissioner Clyde, got to put a pin in it and stick it to the wall. Otherwise it's going to float forever. Well, this started probably 3 years ago under Brian Kelly, the same identical thing.
Right.
Okay. So that, I'm sorry. So that is part of his request too, Gene?
Yeah, that and a vehicle.
And a vehicle.
A vehicle for him or?
One of his trucks, replacing one of his trucks, yeah.
How's that treated here, Todd? Is that in the sixes?
Well, it's not in there at all right now. Your vehicle replacement list hasn't been talked about yet. Typically what we do, we don't do it department by department. We take it the entire fleet. Yeah. We see what's in the worst shape. Sometimes we bounce things down. Like I'll give you an example right now. The health department's turning in a Jeep with a little over 90,000 miles for solid waste. And that's the 11,000, with the health department that solid waste is contributing towards. Is it possible Randy could use that Jeep for a year? And I mean, those are all the questions, but basically we take our entire fleet, choose the X worst vehicles, and those are what gets replaced regardless of what department it comes to. I don't know yet whether Randy's falls into that group or not. We haven't looked at that for 2021 yet.
And do we do that separately from the budget?
Usually it's done in November in conjunction with it. One of the recommendations was that we wait to talk to the new sheriff, since they're almost half the fleet, and see what his thoughts are in terms of replacing vehicles. And so that kind of delayed the entire program because they are the largest portion of our purchases.
Okay. So do you think in like the spring, there's a major potential budget amendment and it's the vehicle fleet?
Probably close to 700,000. Yes.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable to you, Vicki? Okay. JDC. That was fun today. These are just the legislated pay increases, Todd.
For,
Auditor, treasurer,
yes,
prosecutor, recorder.
correct.
Off the top of my head, there's something that Vic asked us for other than the pay increases.
Building envelope issue, the water. I remember it being very complicated because he couldn't get on the adjoining building's roof.
That's the leak I have in my narrative. One of their window, they think it's a window or possibly some of the mortar. When the wind blows just right, it comes in. The problem is they have to drop down between that building and another one, and the owner of the adjacent building will not let us use his roof to mount a crane. So we have to use what's called a spider web going over, and that it was going to cost us $80,000 just to see what was wrong. And then on top of that would be the repair costs. Right now that's been put off. It hasn't leaked. Luckily, we haven't had the right kind of storm. I bet in the spring that comes up again as an issue.
Okay.
Phones at the prosecutor's office, another IT.
So this is one, Vic does not want his phones touched, period. However, they are past their life. And so at some point, we're going to get surprised with what's going to end up $1.5 million to $2 million repair needed right then when it's needed. I'm an advocate for $2 million surprises are hard to deal with in the middle of a year. So we would be better off planning this replacement and scheduling it. However, Vic is very adamant that he does not want his phones touched.
Because they're fine, right? I mean, that's what.
Well, they work, but they also, he got a very good system for what he got, and he doesn't think right now that there's anything comparable. He doesn't want what the county has. I've tried to tell him, well, you could still shop your own, but we need to be getting it replaced. So that's kind of an ongoing issue, but every year that goes by is one more year more likely that it's going to happen. The Justice Center's phones are also supposedly bad. Joanne keeps trying to talk with Lloyd about why he thinks so, but that's also going to be $1 million to $1.5 million replacement on that phone equipment. Lloyd, I believe he was out in the last couple months between all his issues, but I thought he had wanted to try and address the Justice Center next year in 2021. But I wasn't able to double check that with him. But those are things where it's nice to get, this $1 million this year, that $1 million the year after, rather than waiting 3 years until they all pile up and now you've got a $5 million in 1 year,
Looking at the veteran department, why is that going down?
What department are you looking at, Kathleen?
I'm over on page 4, Department 903. Is that a staff person down or?
Yes, although who and why, I would need to talk with Rick again. They turn their budget in as passed by their board, and then you guys have like 30 days to object to it. So that budget already is set. I want to say it's one of their drivers, but I can't swear to that.
Okay. And then IT 915. How have we balanced the telework purchasing needs that I'm sure were intense, although.
So that's going to be a budget amendment for next year, which is already a question that's coming up to Joan. They quit making Smart Pros. We had like 8 Smart Pros still on order. So all those departments are asking, well, what do we do next year? We still want Smart Pros or whatever. The question is whether we're going to be buying that all out of the general fund or whether we're going to try and hold and see if the federal government does grant more. We have almost 26,000 in Zoom licenses that we're going to have to decide if we maintain in place. That's all going to come out of the general fund. Right now, none of that is addressed. We've just all said, well, it ends. Now, some of the Zoom licenses we bought for a year. So I think we're good till April and May on those. Some of them, and I don't know why, we're paying a monthly fee, in which case those monthly fees are going to come up here for January. So there is a lot in IT that's going to need sorted out. The current computer program replacements were kind of put on hold, isn't the right word, because they've been going through them, but they certainly went through them at a much slower pace. So the question is, where does that program pick back up and what funding does it need? And then what was the normal 2021 program? So IT is one where that's basically their basic operating budget, but all the equipment replacements are going to have to be talked about in 2021 and budget amended in.
And what? And just, I'm sorry if you already said this. Why did we not talk to them yet? Lloyd had some help.
Lloyd had a big list in March, or I'm sorry, not March, May, with the tax budget. But then a lot of his timing has gotten screwed up, if you will, because of the coronavirus. They've had to divert time to getting people to work at home and whatnot. So the question is how much of 2020's program needs pushed to 2021 and whether that's going to push 2021 items on or whether he's going to be able to get the rest of 2020 and 2021 all done together. Lloyd has had to be quarantined here for quite a while, and when he's not quarantined, he's running like a chicken with his head cut off. So it just hasn't been a good time to try and get him to sit down and think about that program. He's just trying to get through the end of this year. So my, it's not like any of those purchases have to be made in January, February. My intention was to meet with him then and go over what we're going to do in terms of computer replacements and whatnot. We had agreed to fund roughly 175,000 in computer replacements every year. That's just not budgeted right now because we don't know if that's still true. We've got over 130 Smart Pros that are going to be coming back at the end of this coronavirus. The question is, can we utilize some of those elsewhere? Are they just garbage at that point? Those are all questions that need addressed here before we make more purchases.
Should there be a placeholder amount in there, Todd, based off of that schedule that we all
it's hidden in the 2.4 that you asked about earlier.
It's what?
Some of the items are in that 2.4 you asked about earlier. Some of them, we've got a $19 million carryover we're going to have almost 8 to 10 million unappropriated, even with what you do now. So, it is there. We just don't know where we're spending it yet. So it doesn't need put in a place. But when Janet tells you we have all this unappropriated money, the answer is, well, yeah, but we also have all these projects that we haven't appropriated yet that need to use it.
Well, maybe
that's an every year thing.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing to do though. IT is such a big. Almost every single member of our staff has IT needs.
For sure.
It's just such a big ticket item for the county. It seems a little silly not to try to put a number down. You know what I mean?
Stick whatever you want.
Well, I don't want to put whatever I want. I'm thinking.
I guess my standpoint is I know we're spending it. It's not that it's going to be a surprise next year. We just need to know what we really are doing.
What I want to push back on is I think it is a little harder. It's in a tough budget climate, it's a little harder to defend a big carryover. And while you can defend it by saying a bunch of things, it's a little easier to put the money in that we know there's going to be an IT a substantial IT
Mhm.
expense. I think we should put it there rather than just say it's in Todd's head.
Mhm.
Well, here's maybe a little, to take it one step further. The 175, some of those computers were purchased because of COVID. So that should reduce that number. But the first number that started with what was needed for the COVID, primarily video storage on the server, was and I'm doing this from memory, $300,000 price tag that went to 5 something, and Lloyd was trying to get it back down. Has that made any progress to your knowledge? I haven't heard anything.
It's supposed to be delivered in the next week, so we're
Okay.
hopeful. But
So
yeah, the only issue with putting the number in is then people think that is their number. And sometimes, like Lloyd was trying to cut back to 300,000, he spent a month trying to get a number down that didn't need gotten down, so to speak. It's easier to sit and talk with them. But again, we can put, if you want to put 250 in, we can put 250 in, whatever you want to do.
Well, I think it just makes us look more responsible in that we aren't like the carryover number. As much as you can get down on paper, I just feel like that's a better scenario to be in.
I agree with that if it's actual. I mean, it's, if you know that is what you're doing.
And I think too that there's been a commitment on this IT front, and part of what we said when we made the commitment was we really have to be committed to this over, the 5-year period, and you were very adamant about that, and I think rightfully so. So I feel like, okay, let's show that. So that would be my position on the IT budget. I think it's important. I mean, it's hard. I mean, we've done the telework stuff, and then also just all the cybersecurity issues that are out there. We are prioritizing this, and we should show that.
So would that be in the 6, Todd, capital, or where would that be?
That goes in the 5s, and usually it goes through Joanne because they're buying it for other departments, and Janet doesn't want IT to have to do chargebacks. But we can stick, like I said, we can put whatever number in you want. Do you want to do the 175? Do you want to stick $1 million in?
I think we should stick the number in from the IT proposal that was like the last one before that we made the decision based on.
Is that 175?
No, it was more, well, I'll have to look. I don't know that he put, that's where he put phones, but I don't know that he had a number to that, etc. I'll look through it.
Yeah, I don't remember the number either.
That'll go in Fund 012, Todd, or does that go up in?
Well, it depends. Like a server would go in Lloyd's, the computers go in Joanne's. It's chaotic.
Can you try to do that for next week, and then explain your work so we can just follow up on that? Okay.
What do you need then?
Stop you trying to come to the meeting.
We just have a budget. Bye.
All right. I don't have anything else here.
Okay, that's it for the general fund.
Is this EMA number still right, Todd? Like with all
that is, I can't remember who brought it up. Someone from the state. I think it was the state EMA office. You're not allowed to technically make purchases unless they're appropriated for. And so the question always is, in an emergency, what would happen? So we set this 15,000 aside with the understanding that if there ever were an emergency where Ryan would have to go and tell people, hey, you all need to go to the hotel because the train crashed, that's the 15,000 that he's making that order with in that moment. Then it would come to the board to reappropriate the rest of the expenses later. So this kind of always sits there. I think he's used that money once, and it was earlier this year to purchase some water and whatnot. But this is kind of a placeholder for policy matters.
Okay. That's helpful. And then how to make sense of this non-general fund budget? I mean, what would you recommend here, Todd? I mean, it's hard for me to even it's hard for me to make sense of it in this format. What do you advise here?
Is this the actual revenue?
This is the expense side.
No, well,
But
there's
yes,
more
in most of those cases, that fund has the money, or else, they couldn't do that. A lot of the earlier ones are automatic funds, like 1,000 is the auto title fund. 1,001, that's your REA fund. The 1,000 teens and 1,020s are all your court funded funds.
But I mean, that first column, it says 2020 REV. Isn't that revenue? I mean, I don't know.
Revised budget.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
1201 is Mickey. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to, I don't know how much you want to look at his budget. Like your department's 1330 is the dog warden. 52, 54, 56 is water resources. 7,000 is Joanne. 7040 is myself. 1410 is JFS. A lot of the others are special funds dedicated to a very specific purpose. Generally, the board, doesn't delve too much into that, other than to make sure that the fund is staying, maintaining balance.
Do you recommend that we work through your narrative document?
Yeah, most of that was for general fund. We can talk about that. Some of it we've already kind of talked about, but at least give you guys an idea. For our facilities, and this goes back to Mike. Mike had the idea that he wanted to build new. And so a lot of our renovation projects were just sort of put on hold and moved out. We kind of need to get back to that, because for 3 years now, we really haven't done any major capital improvements to any of our buildings. If we're keeping these buildings, we need to do something with them. In particular, the Record Center needs dealt with on a capital side, roof, air conditioning, those type of things. We need to deal with the annex now that it's sitting empty. We need to deal with our motor pool, which has sat vacant for 2 years now. That's at least $80,000 to pull the tanks out of it. Joanne at one point had that ready to go, and then we put all capital projects on hold when the coronavirus hit. Riddle, I mean, nobody's ever been happy with it. It's just really not a very good office building, but on the other hand, we own it. A lot of money could be put into Riddle and still not have a good building, but that's some things that the board needs to decide. The old portion of the admin building, Kelly Jo's Lawn said that it needs renovated. Just coats of paint, new tile, just basic things like that that have been done elsewhere in the building, but not yet to that portion. On top of it, we did do the roof, but there's still some window leaks and that type of thing that need dealt with in there. The Board of Elections still is asking for modifications to their space. We had set aside $150,000 last year, and not all that got spent. I told them during our meeting that we would probably need to sit down in early 2021 to figure out what was actually going to happen. So those are the most urgent buildings right now. Again, I've said over and over, your concrete needs dealt with. You've got heaving concrete in front of the building there. It's not horrible, but we do still get people tripping on it. If you try and walk from the admin building up to the courthouse, there are some areas that are just atrocious in terms of cracks and heaving and all that type of stuff. We've just never really dealt with any of that. Your parking lots, we need to get back and look at resurfacing some of those so that they don't all come due at once. We have a lot of parking surfaces all over the city of Ravenna. The prosecutor's office leak I put in there again. Hopefully it goes away, but history's shown it'll probably get worse and worse. And then I put on there the admin elevators. Every time those things break down, Shannon just has an absolute fit. The electronics are old, the equipment is old, and as they try and put parts in, something else goes wrong because that new part doesn't work with it. At some point, we're just going to need to replace the elevators. And if Riddle's any guide, we spent $80,000 on a two-person elevator that goes up 3 floors. We're looking at quite an expense if we try and do the 3 elevators in the admin building. But again, they're just at that point in their life where it's very, very difficult to keep up with maintenance on them. Overall counting staffing, again, I said it before, with the moves that we made to the sheriff, I think we overstaffed him given the construction that was occurring. But at some point that the overall salaries of the county need to be coming back down, however that happens. And so that needs planned in 2021 so that we can do it through attrition rather than, having to lay off people in 2023. The Pretty Glen Dam is still sitting there. We talk about the airport. That could be a $2 to $3 million project the year that we decide to take it over. If that's next year, again, you talk about that $16 to $18 million carryover. I've already spent 5 of it just on those 3 lines. The updated wage study, I know Janet is going to be coming to you guys. The minimum of each pay group has not moved in 3 years. And the idea was that every 3 to 5 years, we would update that. And so Janet wants to begin that updating process. The board needs to come to terms with if the update moves a range and makes people fall into the minimum, are they going to automatically be brought to the minimum again? So what happens when we move that range? That needs discussed as we go into 2021 at minimum.
Can I pause you right there, Todd?
Uh-huh.
The dog warden, I'm looking at your notes and
Yes.
I recall the conversation. So he's not at the minimum and needs.
He will be this year. He's like 23 cents off or something.
Okay, so that is something that you noted on here, but that you put in the budget?
Yeah, those are accounted for.
Okay. And who else is like that is not a general revenue fund?
There really
is or was.
Who that?
Ryan Shackelford.
Well, that's a whole other issue because he was a grant fund and we didn't fund any of it, which has always been a sore point. Both he and the old deputy. Now, the irony is when we hired the new deputy, the problem was fixed on that position. And I believe you guys gave Ryan a promotion when you hired the new deputy. I'd have to sort through that mess to see what it was. But yeah, that's a whole story in and of itself. There aren't many left between people having gotten promoted and quitting. There's only a handful left in that grouping.
Okay. Is Ryan on his own on that or?
Well, both Ryan and his deputy came up short in the wage study, but because they were a grant fund, the board did not approve increases for any of the grant funds unless the grant covered it. So he did not get his increases. When his old deputy quit and his new deputy was hired, we hire at the minimum, but all of a sudden that meant that we were hiring a deputy that was paid almost the same as the director. And so I want to say that when you hired the new deputy, you did give Ryan a promotion, but I can't swear to that. I'll double check that for you for next week.
Yeah, could you do that?
Mhm.
And is there anybody else like that on, who else is grant funded? I mean, it's Dave's not,
A lot of the VAWAs were way under and they have not moved up. Vic has been okay with that. And there was one other, WIC, but they're no longer your issue.
and we have, so Dave McIntyre is not general revenue fund, but he's not considered grant funded. So that's
Correct.
why he was on the step.
Correct.
But like
Yeah.
Orion wasn't.
Correct.
Okay. And then you just said the other ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad that wasn't like a huge.
You know, Todd, and the first general, I mean, these are all important. Is there any way we could prioritize those though? Because we can't do obviously all of them at once, but I think maybe we should start making a plan this year, do this one, and then this year do this one. And
Well, that's why I keep saying the facility plan needs reviewed and updated. Again, I said that in 2019, I said in 2020. Some of it, you guys were going to start a group in 2020 and have them meet, but I think the coronavirus kind of nipped that in the bud. But yes, we need to get back together. We used to have a 5-year, I actually had it for 30 years, but plan on where roofs were, where parking lots were. And like I said, Mike kind of tossed that all out the window because he wanted to rebuild. He wanted to do away with Riddle, which isn't a bad idea. And so right now we're kind of floating in that in between of, are we keeping these old facilities, in which case we need to spend money on them, or are we looking at new facilities, in which case let's get started on that. But the board really hasn't committed one way or the other fully yet.
on these offices with the sheriff, hot water issue is still a problem?
They brought it up in their meeting.
Todd, I can't believe this.
I thought they were sticking a loop in that was going to help. According to the sheriff, it didn't. I don't know. I don't know. That's been a nightmare for the sheriff and Joanne both, and I'm not sure. They get told one thing from one person and another from another. But yes, he did bring that up again in his meeting.
Well, the roof leak, is that the new roof or the old roof or what roof?
I actually think it's where the two are meeting is possibly the issue. But there were issues with his old roof that we did know about. A lot of his old portion was put on hold while they did the construction because the fear was during construction things might get damaged, But like his driveway, we had $175,000 set aside to do his driveway. And then Mickey just came in and did a spot patch because of the construction, but that's something that's going to need addressed now that the construction's finishing up. So there's a lot of things in the old portion that we've known needed done. They were just put on hold while the new was underway. I would point out, if you're down on the sheriff, they did request a brand new vehicle for the sheriff. Traditionally, we have not done that. He wants an unmarked vehicle. Dave Doak always drove a marked vehicle.
Oh, the new sheriff wants an unmarked vehicle?
Yeah. So, but again, I don't know if we're going to buy that separately for him and try and have it ready as soon as possible, or if we're going to roll that in with the vehicle program. I just want to point out to you that they did send an email maybe 2 weeks ago saying that they want to get a vehicle quick because the new sheriff is going to need it. And then you'll also note in that sheriff's list, they're saying they still need an additional 2 to 4 positions as the jail fills up on top of the ones already given.
I have a question about the sheriff's budget.
Uh-huh.
Where is your 0002 fund or your additional sales tax?
That's gone.
So is this budget basically presenting a cut to?
Well, you know what? That's a good question. I bet that didn't get carried in. Hold on. Oh, Lord.
Weren't we funding like $400,000 for operations for road?
800,000 total between them all. Let me go back here, because that may not have shown up. No, the sheriff's budget's gonna go up by 800,000 and probation's gonna go up by 250,000. That did not get rolled in on this version I gave you guys.
Say that again. So
The sheriff's department will be going up by almost 800, a little over 800,000. And then adult probation is gonna go up by almost 250,000.
and you're just taking that out of the general fund now instead of the sales tax fund?
Right, and in my other, in the sheet, it's there. It didn't roll up in with this summary that I did, though I'll have to fix that. Probably because it's still coded under the different code. So yeah, that will change. But yeah, 0002, again, there was almost $1 million in labor. That is all going into the general fund now.
But so it doesn't matter funding wise that is no longer being collected. The money is there to just continue funding.
No, that's why I keep saying you're overstaffed now. I mean, something needs figured out. Either staff reductions need to start occurring, or you're going to have to come up with a new revenue stream. Or if sales tax takes off, maybe that will cover it as well. I mean, the truth is, between the three, we got to cover that gap.
I'm sorry. So this should reflect on page 4 under 700.
Yeah,
line 3 should say negative 800.
No, what should happen is in 2021 there should be 13.4 instead of 12.6, and so you'll have an increase of over 850 going to that line.
That's you're making a policy decision there to take it out of the general revenue fund then, and to keep the staffing.
That was the only thing you guys did tell me in August, was that yes, we're going to take the additional sales tax and simply roll it into the main general fund. That was decided. Vicki wasn't there that day, but you and Sabrina indicated that we would continue that payroll through 2021. I mean, we can change that, but yes.
Okay. I didn't remember it that way. I remembered it as saying that line, the 002 would just be gone when the money is gone. Not that we would, I guess I just don't understand how you lose
Well, the money
revenue.
is gone. I've been asking all along, are we going to lay those workers off? Because we needed to tell them the sheriff's contract, I think, is 6 months on their employees. I've been asking that question for a while, and the answer was always, no, we're not going to lay people off, which means you have to stick them in the general fund. There is no other place
just
to
for
put
the
them.
record, Todd, to push back on that, I've never heard we need a 6-month warning due to a
Okay.
labor. That's the first I've ever heard about a notice requirement on a labor contract. I didn't know that. So I haven't heard that over and over
Okay.
again.
Okay. You can decide not to fund the positions and they're going to have to lay off. But no, the board did specifically say that those positions would be added to 001. That was in August specifically, that was addressed. But that is what I've been talking about as we talk about the additional sales tax fund. We've talked about that $1 million in labor and what was going to happen with it. And at no point did the board indicate that it was going to cut those positions when the money ended.
I think that implied in the discussion of we aren't doing anything with that funding, like it expires at this time. So the question of what do we do with the line in the budget is, it's gone. I mean, that, when it expires.
Well, that's true. So now let's not talk about the line of the money. Let's talk about the person. Is the person gone or not? That's the question that I've asked the board, and the board has never indicated.
We never made that decision.
I respectfully disagree with that, because I was told that that money was going to go. And I can specifically say that I was told that because I have been asking the board what was going to happen to those people come January 1st when that money is no longer available. Now, if the board is changing, that's fine. But that question has been asked and answered. I want to make that clear.
Well, I would make clear the opposite, and we can check the minutes.
Okay.
And I already made clear that I have not heard you say over and over about the 6 months.
And I don't know that it's 6 months, but I know, they have their requirements in their contract, and general employees have requirements. I mean, you can't go today and say they're gone January 1st.
No, I understand. That's why I think it's a big.
So I guess let's answer clearly now, because this needs moved on then, if the answer is different than what I assume I've been told.
Well, I don't think at this point we're going to be laying people off January 1st.
No, I understand that, but it seems that we have a situation on our hands about money that's expiring that was being used in different areas. So I've been thinking about that. I think that's the key issue of this entire budget.
I agree. So what is the answer now, so that in the future we can come back and know what was said, so that we do know what the answer is? You have almost $1 million in salaries. Are we going to fund that for a quarter, for a half? Are we funding it for the entire year with the understanding that it's done in that year?
And I would think too, with the flexibility that departments have with their line item, it's just like the maintenance worker. I mean, when we talk about, okay, yes, we'd like you to have this maintenance worker, and then the previous sheriff hires a corrections officer. I think that there could be cuts, and we're not necessarily saying which officers or which positions.
No, you don't have any control over the positions. You have control over the money, though. Of that 1 million, let me get you the figures.
We lost Vicki. I mean, I don't know as much about this particular funding with the sales tax, other than those correction officers. That was done while I was here. But I would think with the changeover of administrations in the sheriff's office, that there are opportunities to potentially save some costs on the labor line item. Is the new sheriff going to set his staffing up identically? And that's one opportunity to say, hey, we don't have as much for you to have the same staffing. But let's pause, because
well, we need the number. I mean, of that $1 million, what are we starting next year with, or aren't we? Because that will be the message then of what they need to do.
Right. Let me pause us while what's going on with Vicki? Can you guys check like the waiting room thing?
I'm looking at her. She's not in there.
Okay, she says she can see us
Her dog might have gotten her.
chewing on the cord.
If anybody
Right.
wants a car warranty, I'm referring them to Todd's personal cell phone number.
Well, let me refer him to Todd too then. 'Cause I am getting hammered with those calls.
I get 3 or 4 a day.
I've been having that too.
I quit answering if they're out of state.
Well, they,
Trick
and I
the
don't know how they do it,
DIN.
but they use people's numbers. Like I've gotten them under Joanne.
I actually had an email trace back and forth. Somebody dialed unknown number 842, typically a cell phone. And I sent them a text, one of those autos, can I call you back later? And they sent a message, who are you? It's like,
Like, wait a minute.
yeah.
All right, no one's in the waiting room right now.
Oh,
All right, Vicky. We see you. Kind of. No video or audio.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Tuffy want you to go out. Like,
He
come
said
on.
A lot, yeah.
All right.
Okay, where are we?
We stopped. I just said that I thought we have to figure out what we want to do here. I mean, I think that there should be some reduction based on the expiration of this funding. Although I'm not sure what the overall picture, if there's ability to do it in some graduated way or not have to do the,
I mean, given their turnover,
amount.
attrition over a year would be, I don't want to say easy to accomplish, but it'd be easy you wouldn't have to lay off. It'd be difficult in terms of the work that needs done. But they have high turnover in those positions.
That would be a gradual thing. It's not going to happen like right now, but
But the sheriff needs informed that that's the plan. If we put the money in, he needs to understand it's for one more year.
right.
Like I said, I have been asking this question. This is the first that it's being indicated that they're going to be cut. Otherwise, I would have liked to have gotten to them earlier. The new sheriff's going to have a lot to deal with.
Yes
separately.
and no, though. I mean, they knew that this money was temporary. I mean,
That was the
I get what
original.
you're saying, Todd, but
That was the original guidelines, but then the board has wavered on that. And a good example is the drug court's probation officer. He was funded out of those grants we gave. He's still employed by the county. The board just rolled him in. Don't forget, it's not just the sheriff. You're going to have to go to Judge Pittman and tell the 250,000 in probation officers are going to need reduced if that's the case as well.
I get it.
Or, I mean, not necessarily, but 250 in probation is also in that fund. But the idea also at the time was that we were going to go to the ballot and the voters would be told this is what's being cut. And then if they voted no, that was your answer. We're going to cut this road patrol. We're going to cut that. Anyway, that as that plan got modified, I think the message of it's temporary also got modified. I don't think Sheriff Doak and his staff has any notion that these positions are going to be cut along with the funding. I think they were under the impression they were going to continue to be funded. And And again, I haven't specifically talked with them. I just know some of the things Ron said.
I think I know in conversations that I've had out there that the budget at the sheriff's office, I think, is a situation that a new sheriff is not, there's a change that's going to happen. One, with sheriffs, and two, with the budget for staffing with the new sheriff. And we're here.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Just whatever figures we do, whatever message needs sent, we can send, but we've got to get it clear now, because honestly, I'm not making it up. I was under the impression it was being funded 100% into 2021, because I asked that question on the list that I gave you guys back in August. That was number 1 or 2, was what are we doing with the staff in the additional sales tax fund? And the message was, we're going to budget it in the general fund. So again, that we can change that message. I'm just saying up until now, that's been the plan and nothing else has been communicated anywhere. So give me the number and give me the message and we'll get it out. We can do that next week, but.
What are the options, Todd, other than, like, what do we have revenue wise to soften the blow of the cut?
Well, your carryover, you're going to be burning through that. And we knew, like I said, the whole transition to the new jail, we knew that we were going to spend down funds as we converted to the new jail and had people floating around. We also knew that a recession was coming. Nobody knew it was going to be because of COVID, but everybody thought that this year, next year, there was going to be a recession. So we had money set aside in that contingency so that we wouldn't have to lay off workers. We could ride out some of that recession. So we've known we were going to be spending down our cash balance all along. And that is what we're going to do next year. We're going to spend down our cash balance. The only question is, how much do you begin having your expenses meet your revenues? You know, as your revenues come up, how much do you cut those expenses versus how much do you leave them up until there's no point of no return, and then we make reductions, and that point is 3 or 4 years out. I mean, we can sustain what we're doing. The other thing that matters then is if you spend $3 million on the airport and you spend $2 million in Riddle and you spend $1 million on the admin building, you know, then that shortens that time frame from 4 years to 3 years to 2 years. So that's why I said the facility, I mean, all that rolls in together. We only have so much money. So part of it depends on what we're going to do with the facilities as to how long we can sustain this payroll overage. But this is what I've been talking about when I say that we're overstaffed and we need to begin addressing it. This is the problem that we've known was coming. It's not a surprise. And we have time to deal with it, but we need the plan so that people begin enacting it. You know, there's other departments that possibly could reduce and help alleviate that. It doesn't necessarily all have to come from the sheriff, although right now the staffing is his. But that's the whole picture that needs tied together here as we move on. But we can get through 2021.
Is it just the sheriff from probation that has used this money for operations?
Yes.
Okay.
But some of it, like the logic of why we funded the probation department was because of the opioid epidemic.
Right.
But now that you've also expanded the jail, there is no let up in that. I mean, their cases are not going down, they're going up. So the logic that they can let those people go, it's going to be very, very difficult. In fact, they're asking for, you know, Hank did a good job of getting grant funding for one of his positions for this year, but they've always said they need more. Their caseloads, you know, the state standard is like 22 cases and they're up around 30.
Yeah.
What about the large grant that the drug court just got?
The 500,000?
It was a large grant.
Yeah, and they, a lot of what the state does though is you're not allowed to supplant. So you can bring additional people in, but you can't take existing workers and move them over. They actually are using one of their people out of that grant from what I understand. But that's not a permanent solution to the issue.
Just looking at, there are three pots of money, it looks like: adult probation, corrections, and road patrol. And for the budget, the budgeted amount for this year is almost twice where they're at to date. The current actuals is 167, they're budgeted 304.
Part of that's probation has been using grants, but that grant is gone. That's the grant they talked about earlier this year that they lost. That's 2 positions that are going to be refunded out of general fund money that originally they had, because probation did understand the funding was temporary. They had been looking for places to fund these people out of, but unfortunately, instead of finding more, they actually lost some.
Gene, what was that third one? You said probation and road patrol. What was the third one?
Corrections.
Corrections.
Right. I mean, just looking at it.
Are you looking at 02? We've got 1 million budgeted and we've got 837 spent. Is that what you're seeing, Gene?
In 002, yeah. I was just breaking out the payroll totals.
Well, I thought you said like half, but yeah.
I would think that, you know, you guys voted this grant in 5 years ago, and you did what you could for a period of time with extra road patrol and extra probation officers, and that funding has come to an end. And I think, I mean, my recommendation would be to pull that funding back and, you know, do it somewhat gradually, as I'm trying to tease out a little bit, and you're talking about too, Todd. But and the sheriff, as a new sheriff comes in, like, I don't know, like, is it, I know Dave is leaving. No one else is leaving. Like, all of his deputies and his senior staff, are they all staying? Like, that's not typically.
Well, typically, I could tell you what happened with Sheriff Doak. They went from having 1 major to 2. Usually new elected officials cost money. They don't say that.
Well,
you know,
but
because
sometimes
they need
they're
help to
handed
get
something,
through it.
and that's how it goes.
Yeah.
I mean,
But, you know, I mean, you need a major, or right now they even promoted Major Kelly. I think he's the deputy chief. Anyway, that person may go, but the new person's going to bring a person in there. You know what I mean? Like,
You know,
so
Todd,
yeah, there's turnover, and that's not, I mean, the admin in the sheriff's building is only 300,000. Even if they lost their entire administrative staff, it wouldn't make the 800,000.
I think what you suggested earlier is probably the easiest to take, is through attrition. It's going to take a year maybe, but I think that would be the least painful.
and if there's money between the budget and actual for this year, like, stop there. And then, you know, look at, you know, budgeting the attrition going forward, and not just then staying at the high amount and
Right,
budgeting
but
it.
obviously the new sheriff has to be brought into this conversation. I mean,
Because the other thing too with the correction officers, I know we did that, but then he didn't hire for, I mean, those positions weren't filled. So I'm not sure where are we actually on that? And that was public defender money, I thought.
We had, with the sheriff, he is still trying to fulfill the 15 that you gave. Some of it, if there's a good thing about the coronavirus, it's that they were able to reduce numbers in the jail. And so those 15 were not as urgent because we didn't have the prisoners there. So they were able to, you know, cordon off and not use those people. Like I said, at our meeting, what they indicated was when the jail reaches full capacity, they're going to need 2 more positions on top of that 15. The other thing that's been hinted is they are having trouble gathering applications, which is a hallmark of insufficient pay to get people in. And so one of the things you may have coming at you next year is that the pay for the corrections officers needs raised Some of it, nobody wants to apply because they don't want to work in a jail where coronavirus is running rampant, even though our jail, knock on wood, has done very well. Stories of other jails, I think, have scared a lot of people. So on that side of thing, the issue is compounding itself, not alleviating itself. As the jail begins filling, they're going to have a very hard time reducing staff. Now, the new sheriff may find ways. I'm not going to argue for or against that. But the current sheriff has indicated that not only are they going to need that 15, they've been lucky because of coronavirus keeping the numbers down, but they're going to need an additional 2. And Sheriff Zukowski was at that meeting. Now, I don't know that he understood the ins and outs, but he was there and heard that request being made.
Like the first time everybody looks at a budget, it's kind of glazed over because they don't even, you
Right.
got to study it. But just to make sure I'm looking at the right fund, 002 for this year, it's budgeted in payroll for $1,008,835, not
Right.
800. So there's a 25% or a 20% reduction right there. And if maybe there's some ground to move on, instead of funding it at Todd's recommended 8, funded at 4, it's going to force the conversation, hopefully in the first half of next year. And the message has to go out. We funded it for 6 months, but it's funded at 80% for 6 months. And probably more importantly, you need to figure out, because the revenue is now gone. But then that also includes, I don't know what a good number is then for the adult probation. If they were budgeted at 304 and only spent 167 and their grant's gone, do they need to be budgeted at the full 304? They were roughly 150 actuals past 3, 154, 147, 203. So I don't know. That's just a question. Maybe you hopefully know a lot better than I do, Todd. But
we can do whatever you guys want to do. The message in August was go ahead and fund them the whole year, and that's what I was doing. The message now, if we do partial funding, we need to come up with the amount, and we need to get that out to the elected officials so they can begin making that plan. If the plan is to have them reduce,
I think a reduction needs to be made based on. I mean, Gene just asked you a question.
What was that?
Well, there's actually 2 looking at it. One is what is the best estimate half-year value, given the fact that the grant for adult probation has waned? Is 50% 150 or is 50% 100? Do you know by any chance?
That's a question to you.
I don't understand.
Well,
Okay.
right now they're budgeted for 2020 at 304,088.
Right, and they've never spent the whole budgeted amount
because of grants.
Because of grants. We've
So
always held that in there because that is the funding necessary for 3 people, which is what the board had promised them all through that period.
So
They never
50%,
used it because of grants
50% would be 152 then.
of their 3 positions. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, the good news is for the probation is this grant. I mean, I know that you can't just fill the gap, but overall, they're
I can tell you, I had a conversation about a month ago from Hank, who indicated that they were going to need to move funding back to these positions. And I told him it was there. Because again, I'm acting on what I was told in August. So they are needing to move positions into this funding slots, not out of them. And that was with the grant in hand.
So they're going to hire people?
Not hire, but they need to move because they lost another grant. Again, I'll call Hank and see where he's at. but my understanding was they were going to be using more of this money, not less, in the coming year because of some funding issues that they ran up against. But that doesn't mean we don't cut the funding. I'm just telling you that no department was expecting this.
I get it,
So
and
it will be an adjustment period for them.
I know. I understand that, and it's unfortunate. I do think there was some notice, perhaps not expressed by you, Todd, in the last month, but over the long haul of it being a temporary funding source.
And just for clarity, the 800,000 for the full year is not in the sheriff's department 700 right now. That needs to be added, correct?
Correct.
Whatever we do add, yeah, that's not,
Okay.
the 002 portion did not show up.
All right.
And what we're saying, what I'm trying to understand, Gene and Todd, based on, so the 800 for the sheriff from the now gone away 002, how much of that was spent in 2020? Like that was budgeted.
Year to date is 837,177.
So they're
Remember,
over.
there'll be at least 2 more pay periods that'll come into that. The budget was 1,000,008.
1.8. Okay.
1,000,008, and the expense to date was 837. Is that correct, Todd? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah.
So maybe some of the disconnect is, I'm not saying it is, it's just some of the disconnect I would think would be in the what we're calling sheriff's department should also, because it was part of the 002 fund, should include public defender in the discussion. That's
Probation.
yeah, which
Yeah.
gets us to the $1 million. The sheriff, it's in and of itself was 704. So
I think, I mean, it seems like proposing a reduction of half the amount for each department. And then having a conversation at the midpoint of the year saying, and I would expect this to potentially go down all the way, or, you know, depending on how the budget looks, but this funding has run out. We will spot a half year and see where.
well, the intent of doing not the full year, but making it the half year is gets the conversation going quicker.
Right. And
If there's another
the
512,000 that's needed to get this into the realm of attrition, like Todd's recommending, that makes good sense, I guess. So we're not letting anybody go. That's always bad press. But the flip side is it starts a conversation before you're at the end of the year. Everybody's got to come to the table.
Yeah.
And of course, that's only part of the big picture. So if you look at the sheriff, that'll go from 12.6. If you add the 512, that'll take him to 13.1 real quick. So
Vicki, does that make sense?
Yeah, cut it by like 400. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Instead of 800, give 400?
well, I think that may be a little light. Do you agree, Todd? It represents relatively the expense to date, but the grant went away in adult probation.
So you're saying 500, Gene, or
Well, 50% of this year's budget rounds out at 512.
512?
Well, I was thinking 400 from the sheriff and 125 from probation. So is that about the same?
That's close. I was at 140 for, yeah, 152 for adult probation. Taking into account that that revenue is not going to be there because the grant's gone.
So adding 400 or 512 to the sheriff
400.
and 152 to adult probation.
I think that's fair. Todd?
We'll do whatever you want.
All right, I gotta go. So are we good, or do you have more questions, Vicki?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Is there anything else, Todd?
No,
Nope. Okay. Julie, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this and going over time, especially. Thank you.
No problem.
All right.
Move
Take
to
care,
adjourn.
everyone.
Move to
Talk to you
adjourn.
next week.
All righty.
You gonna vote?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I move to adjourn. Did I get a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Kathleen,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
thank you.